Welcome to the Friday Show, brought to you by Woodbine. Hey, this Saturday at Woodbine, big news. The Jackpot High Five has mandatory payout on Saturday, the last race of the day. And there's a jackpot of $409,657. You can see it there on the screen. Saturday, also, you've got the Best Arabian Stakes, and it's a grade 2 for fillies and mares going 7 furlongs. Grade 3 Maple Leaf Stakes, 1.25 miles, both on the all-weather Tapeta track. That also is for 3 and up fillies and mares. I'm Ray Paulick, along with Joe Nevills, the bloodstock editor of the Paulick Report, and pleased to have our old friend Larry Collmus join us this week. Larry is fresh off calling the Breeders' Cup for I don't know how many years you've been doing this now, Larry, but it's great to have you on the show. Also the voice of the Kentucky Derby. You know him from TVG. What other tracks are you calling these days?
Kentucky Downs. Of course, right now I'm sitting at the Hilton in Del Mar, getting ready to call the fall meet. It's not normally good to be the fall guy, but that's what I am. So I'm.
You did call the summer meet in Del Mar in 2020, I believe.
Yeah, right? Well, but during COVID,
right?
So, but yeah, it's good. It's good to be here. Breeders' Cup was fun. Took a trip back to the East Coast for a little bit, just to do laundry, and and then came back, and here we are at Del Mar and set to go.
They do have dry cleaners and laundromats in California. I don't know if you knew that.
I looked. I couldn't find one.
Okay.
No.
Well, hey, I went back and I listened to a bunch of the calls. I thought, Larry, these were some tough races. And he had to miss a call here, miss a horse there. I mean, some of those finishes were fantastic. What was the most challenging race for you to call on the 2 days cars? Because I mean the mile. That horse,
yeah, probably the mile.
The
mile's always there's always a lot going on, because it's like with the turf, there's time to, for them to get into their positions, and they sort of just, take a while and wait and make their move late. And the mile, it's just sort of it's always a big field. There's always a flying finish on the grass, and we couldn't have got a closer photo. I've called a lot of close ones at the Breeders' Cup, but I held back on that one. I knew Godolphin won, and I'm like, that's good enough. I'm not going to try to pick that one out, but it was exciting, and got to get through it, and you do a lot of work, a lot of prep for these big races, just making sure you know who all those horses are. In some races you can get away with maybe not being quite as on top of who's in the race, but at the Breeders' Cup, you really have to be, and you really have to put in all that work, and that's how it all comes out. And it's a lot of fun, but it can be a little high pressure for sure.
I think at the 8th pole of the mile, you made a reference to Master of the Seas trying to get into it, which, I mean, I didn't even see him at that point of the race, but somehow you threw him in there, so you obviously were keeping an eye on him.
Yeah, I saw him way on the outside. There's. I don't think I'm, the best at so, Trevor was always so good at picking up horses from the back of the pack. And, one of the guys that I think is excellent at is Pete Aiello at Gulfstream. And, to me, you try to keep track of as many of these horses. And I saw Master of the Sea starting to come up on the outside, and it looked like he's got to be a part of it. But, you really couldn't tell until they got there late, because he was really rolling at the end.
Yeah. So I think the race that, the big takeaway race, I think, for a lot of people for this year's Breeders' Cup is going to be Codys Wish winning the Dirt Mile. Everyone knew the story. Everyone knew what was at stake there. I could feel the emotion in your voice, but when you have a race that is unfolding that dramatically, like, we didn't know if Cody was going to get there or not. We didn't know how the finish was going. How do you convey the proper emotion with that without sort of going overboard into just sort of straight up yelling into the microphone? Like, it seems like that'd be a tricky balance to maintain.
Yeah, it definitely is, because and I put something on Twitter, or X, earlier in the day that, I tried to stay, without having a bias in a race, except for that race. Codys Wish is Codys Wish. You have to root for him, right? So they're coming, so I had a conversation earlier in the week with Kelly Dorman, Cody's dad. And, I talked to him, about a lot of times I'll prepare and and think about what I want to say if a certain situation comes up in a race call. And I said, I can't. I've done whatever I've done with this horse and Cody already. I'm not really thinking about it. Can't really come up with what I want to say if he wins. And he goes, Larry, you've been speaking from the heart all this time. Just keep doing it. And I'm like, whoa. And that's what it just actually the timing of it came out great because I kind of knew he won. And I'm like, I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna just say he's gonna. I think he won by a nose. And what I had thought of, right before the race was, this was it, right? So, thank you, Cody. Thank you, Codys Wish. And unbelievably, that's what the cameras were like. Thank you, Cody. There was Cody. Thank you, Codys Wish. There was Codys Wish. I'm like, perfect. So, it worked out well. And, then I'm flying home after the Breeders' Cup and I get a text from someone. Did you hear getting a rumor about Cody on the flight home? And I'm like, oh, no. And then you just kind of think about it. It's like, well, the horse is done. He's not going to run anymore. And it's like, just the whole situation is just mind blowing. And I'm just so happy this weekend that I got to meet the whole family, including Cody. It was just a great experience.
Yeah. It's the kind of, you can't make it up kind of story.
It really is.
Yeah.
His dad gave me another thing I put on Twitter, gave me a sticker. There's this sticker of Cody and the Codys Wish. And I bought this new iPad stand that I put for calling the races, and I put the sticker on.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I'll have Cody and Codys Wish with me all the time now.
That's nice. Mm-hmm. Larry, you started out as just calling the races at the track, and then NBC picked you up. What's the difference between calling for an on-track audience, whether it's a few thousand people scattered there on a Wednesday or a big crowd on Saturday, versus calling for not just television, but a television audience that might not be full of people that are used to races?
Yeah, I think there's a subtle difference in those in making those calls, and one of the things that I like to do is we find out who we're doing pieces on, who the storylines are, who the people are going to meet and see before the race, and then try to incorporate that into the call. Because you had for the Breeders' Cup, you had Frank calling for the house, and he's calling for the hardcore everyday better, and I'm calling for the people watching on television. So I think you do need to have a different type of feel for the call, not dummy it down or anything like that, but at the same time, you just don't want to, say too many things that are so inside baseball or whatever that people might not understand.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, the racetrack announcer is something that is very particular to the racetrack itself, but you are, as part of the NBC crew, you're a part of the on-air talent there. Are you part of, sort of pre-Breeders' Cup meetings, a way that, someone holding a microphone, an Eddie O or Jerry Bailey or someone might be doing the same as them? Or are you kind of left alone to do your thing because, it's sort of separate from the sort of glossy presentation of what NBC puts out there?
I go to most of the meetings, if not all. We all get together in the trailer there, and usually the Wednesday. This week was the Wednesday before the Breeders' Cup. We had a 3-hour meeting, going over every show that we were going to do, every minute, and so I need to find out if there's occasionally they'll have me do something else. Like the starting gate for the Breeders' Cup Classic, and I have to find out that I'm going to be doing that, so I got to write that out. The 2 is, the 3 is, the 4 is, and then try to get it down to 8 seconds a horse and all that stuff. So I do that. I like to be in the meetings too, just to get a general feel for races. I mean, you look at past performances and you're like, okay, uh, I know who should be going to the front, who should be closing, but there might be something I don't know about that Randy or Jerry or Edzo or someone's going to bring up, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that might be something important to note, in the call. Trainer told me this, that the horse is going to go to the lead, so.
Do you have any
Pay attention to all
communication?
that.
Oh, sorry. Do you
Go ahead.
have any communications with the truck during the race day itself? Like, while the races are going, do you have someone in your ear, like giving you anything, or?
Not during the race.
Okay.
That was talked about, and if there was, I'm sure if there was an emergency situation, let's say a horse pulled up, heavy favorite or something like that, and I missed it, because I mean, sometimes, to be honest with you, the whole race you're trying to watch everything, but if you're in the front of the pack and something happens in the back or vice versa, you can miss it because you can't get them all in your binoculars. So it's never happened that they've had to say, oh, Larry, look back or whatever, and luckily, but they can, and we've talked about it. So I think it would be somewhat of a distraction, but at the same time, it may be a necessary one. I remember calling a race for ESPN. It was Zenyatta's last race at Hollywood Park, and they brought me in to call it just for ESPN. And they weren't used to having their own race caller. And the producer of the show did the all call during the race, and he's talking to everybody. It wasn't Zenyatta's race, it was I think the yellow ribbon on the undercard. And he's talking in my ear the entire race. And when the race was over, he said, Larry, did I talk in your ear the whole race? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, and you were okay with that? I'm like, yeah, I just ignored it. Because I knew it wasn't for me, and I just kept going.
You seem to be in mid-season form when you called these races last Friday and Saturday.
Not easy.
You've been doing mostly TVG, handicapping and hosting and that sort of thing. Did you sneak away and just call some races privately to warm up for the Breeders' Cup?
I thought about it. I did call the jump races at Far Hills.
That's
the steeplechase.
That's a good warm up right there.
It's so different. But yeah, I went up there Thursday, and just my setup in that room wasn't ready yet. I was going to call a few races. I think I ended up calling one, and then I'm like, okay, I should be good. The preparation, it helps to be in like calling and being sharp, but the preparation makes up for it. Just knowing the horses, and then it's like riding a bike. Just once you're in tune with the race, then you're good to go. And luckily, like Derby day and days like that, there's a bunch of races earlier in the card that I'm calling, so that sort of like gets you going. And one thing I've found being a regular track announcer is when I came back from being away for a while, the first week was always great. Second week sucked. I would be way off just because I think the adrenaline's gone, sort of, and you're like, okay, routine, everything's fine, and it's not. So you sort of recognize it, that you can't take anything for granted. You can't take a 4-horse field for granted. I mean, you just have to be prepared as possible.
So every race caller that does a national TV broadcast at some point does this for the first time. Is there something that you wish you would have known during your first national TV call of a race that you know now, that you wish you could give to your past self that information?
It's a great question, and I'd say no, because one of the things I did when I got that job for NBC was make phone calls. Tom Durkin, Dave Johnson, Mike Battaglia, all these guys that called. I don't think Trevor, I didn't call him at the time, but just all the guys that had called the Kentucky Derby. And I'm like, all right, I've watched all these Kentucky Derbies. I got a feel for how they are. Is there anything that I need to know that's going to catch me off guard?
Mhm.
And they pretty much said no. Like, it is what it is. It's as well as I do. They said that it's nerves, fighting, especially Tom.
Yeah.
Tom and I are both a little on edge for these calls. Dave was more laid back. He was, even though he gave that strong down the stretch they come, I don't think he was not get that nervous as we did. But anyway, it was they were very helpful, and I wanted to make sure that I was as ready as possible by talking to guys that had been there, done that.
So you're back at Del Mar, and news came out earlier this week that Del Mar will not only be hosting the Breeders' Cup next year in 2024, but also in 2025.
Yeah, saw that. And
exciting for that'll mean one. Presuming that Trevor doesn't come back for the fall meet,
right,
which he hasn't done now for a while, that would mean one announcer for TV and the track, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's what we did in 2021, and that was a last minute thing because Trevor was supposed to come for that, and he had hurt himself at his house in Minnesota, and so I ended up being the only voice. It was kind of a weird deal because we weren't ready for it too much, because literally we didn't find out until right before that Trevor wasn't going to be there. So assuming, and again, we hate to assume anything, but if I'm going to be coming back for the fall meet, the next 2 years, I would be the sole voice that you would hear both on NBC and at the track.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Now you go.
I was just kidding. What do you like about Del Mar? I know you've got your breakfast place, you've got your favorite dinner place.
Like about Del Mar? Everything.
I said it was going to be some softball questions there.
I mean, it is just, the area is just so beautiful, and it's so relaxing. And I get here and it's funny. Like it just feels like home. I get to the airport in San Diego, know exactly where I need to go. And just a lot of times I have turned on my GPS just to remind me how to get places. Not here. Like, get on to 5, I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I mean, the weather, the announcer's booth up there is fantastic. Great view. Looking forward to meeting the fans again. We did that last year. The third race, we have a situation for Karma, for horse aftercare, where you can buy a ticket to come up and watch the race with me in the booth at Del Mar. And so I'm looking forward to that. Just, you mentioned Claire's. I went there this morning for breakfast.
I'm sure they missed you.
My friends Bill and Jeffrey Strauss at the Pamplemousse. Had dinner there last night. Going to Ken's Sushi tonight with Gary Fenton, and
the greatest hits.
It's just so much fun. I love Del Mar.
Now, if I recall, you've been doing the the third race, or some degree of race, of having someone come in and watch you call the race for charity for quite a while now, haven't you?
Yeah, Tom Durkin did that at Saratoga before I did, and so I kept up that idea. We did it in New York for the Backstretch Employee Service Team. They still do that at Saratoga with Frank Miramati now. I decided to bring it to Del Mar, and I mentioned it to Billy Koch, who's involved with Karma, and let's do it. Let's have the thing that we do at Saratoga and have it for Karma Del Mar. So it's worked out really well.
Is there anything in particular you've learned about your own job from watching other people watch you do your job? People who aren't as familiar with the way that race calling goes.
A lot of people are surprised, that it's just you and your binoculars up there and just calling what you see. And, it's neat. It's neat to watch it from a different perspective and hear from people that are kind of shocked at how what goes on up there, and thinking that they're spotters and things like that. It makes you appreciate your job a little bit more, especially when you can put a smile on people's face.
Mm-hmm. So you've called Breeders' Cups, you've called Kentucky Derbies, you've called 2 Triple Crown winners, which is 2 more than Tom Durkin got to call, I believe.
What time?
Just ask him.
You've called at Suffolk Downs. You've called jump races and wherever the hell it was, New Jersey, I guess.
Yeah.
And even in Charlestown. What's left? What are some bucket list things that Larry Collmus, not to step on any other announcers, but Melbourne Cup or Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe or something?
Well, I crossed off the Dubai World Cup this year, so I got to do that. The Arc, yeah, the Arc would be that would be a fun thing, or I don't know. It's sometimes these opportunities just come and you just say, hey, you gotta do it. But I would say the Arc would be one race that just off the top of my head, maybe the Saudi Cup. I haven't done that one, but that's Melbourne Cup might be too many horses for me. Getting old.
That just seems so daunting.
Yeah, it does.
And it seems like the announcers give the order of finish for almost the entire field.
I know, it's crazy how they do that. It's an Australian thing, and Michael Roney used to do that when he came over here. We'd go all the way back.
Well, 5-horse fields, though,
different, yeah, for sure. But it's like, it's just how they do it over there.
Mm-hmm. Ray listed off all these places that you've called races at. Is there a particular booth that stands out in your head, either for the view, for the ambiance within the booth itself, for anything particular? Is there one that you think, like, if this is the one where I had to be for the rest of my life, or one that just really sticks in your heart? Which one is that?
Well, Del Mar, for sure. I mean, you've got a view of the Pacific Ocean right from the booth. You've got great sight lines right at the finish line. You've got a big booth with a desk and a couch, and it's just a really nice announcer's booth. And then, on the other side of the perspective, you got Saratoga, and that booth has everything in your way when you're calling the races. There's poles everywhere and glares and this and that. But it's Saratoga, so you don't care. It's fun, it's great. So those two are polar opposites as far as announcers booths go. And Monmouth was a cool booth. I really like the booth at Monmouth. It's huge. Outside of that, Belmont, you'd be surprised, not so much. Let's see.
Where are you at Kentucky Downs? How about Kentucky Downs? You're in a trailer.
That's not even a booth. That's a I'm on a ledge basically at Kentucky Downs, and I love going there, and I love the people I work with, but I can't wait for it to be over. It's tough.
Well, Larry, congratulations on another great Breeders' Cup in terms of just calling the races accurately and with the right amount of excitement. Looking forward to hearing you throughout the meet here at Del Mar and at the next 2 Breeders' Cups at Del Mar on NBC. So,
well, thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for taking the time. Let's have fun at Del Mar.
I will see you there, and look forward to our paths crossing. Either Claire's or Fidel's or one of those. I don't go to Ken's, but
Fidel's or Tony's Chacal are right next to each other. We'll go to one of those.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week's Friday show. Our special guest, Larry Collmus, thanks to him on behalf of Joe Nevills and myself. We'll see you next week. Thanks to Woodbine for their sponsorship. And don't forget about that big high five mandatory payout jackpot tomorrow on Saturday. We'll see you next week.
Support award-winning independent horse industry journalism and become a Paulick Report Insider on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, insiders get access to exclusive Q&As with Paulick Report staff, insight behind our editorial process, exclusive opinions and on-site analysis, Paulick Report merch, and more. This is not a paywall. The website you know and love will always be the same. But if you want more, and you want to make our coverage even better, visit patreon.com/Paulick Report and become a Paulick Report Insider today.